I'm Susan McGinnis with Clean Skies TV News. I'm joined now by Fred Krupp, who's the president of the Environmental Defense Fund. Fred, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Susan.
You are talking here at CERA about a climate agenda and a place for coal in the nation's climate plans. What is your stance on how coal fits into a climate agenda?
You know, coal is 51% of all the electricity we generate comes from burning coal. And we're not going to stop burning coal overnight. In fact, we're going to be burning coal for a long time to come. So we've got to figure out how to burn it cleanly, and by cleanly, meaning capturing the CO2 that comes out of it. But we can do that. New technologies are here. They're beginning to be scaled up. And so not only can we insist that new coal plants capture their CO2, we can also retrofit many of the existing coal plants, which will allow us to drive CO2 emissions down fast.
So you believe that environmental case for coal has to do with carbon capture and storage?
That's the key. You know, there are many problems with coal mining. We can't ignore the fact that mountaintop removal has decimated, many places in Appalachia. We can't ignore the fact that streams have become acidified, and we need to address all those problems with proper rules and regulations. But the big thing that is needed to make coal a viable continuing option, we have a lot of it in this country, is carbon capture and storage.
Right.
And the way you get carbon capture and storage is you put in a cap and you ask the utilities to capture the CO2 because it's doable.
Which would make it cleaner after it's burned. But as you were saying, carbon capture and storage doesn't solve the problem of the deaths that occur to miners every year from mining the coal, in addition to the mountaintops that you were talking about.
Absolutely, and we need to address all of those problems. There are a lot of problems with coal, and they all need to be addressed. I just am a realist. I don't think we're going to stop burning coal next year. I think we're going to be burning it for years to come. So while we address those other problems, in order to have a future for coal, we also need to capture the CO2.
Right. So where do you stand in relation to like James Hansen and other scientists who say that in order to preserve the planet, that CO2 needs to be reduced from the current levels of parts per million, something like 385 down to at most 350?
Well, many scientists around the world have reached a consensus that a safe level of CO2 in the atmosphere would be 450 parts per million. I don't think there's anything safe about that. I think it's really a resignation that maybe that's the best we can do. I'm more hopeful. I think we can do better. I think that I would agree with Dr. Hansen in the sense that I think we're already seeing at today's levels horrendous effects, like the fact that even at today's levels we're losing our polar ice caps.
But can you do this 350 with CCS?
Yes, because actually the quickest way to have a more ambitious target is with CCS, because the existing inventory of coal-fired power plants dwarfs the emissions from the new plants that are being built. So not only do you need to have renewable sources of energy or complete carbon capture, zero emissions from the new plants, carbon capture gives you the possibility of capturing it from the existing fleets. And that's what they're doing at Mountaineer. The American Electric Power Company is retrofitting a portion of their waste gases in West Virginia and capturing it. And that actually is if you were Dr. Hansen and you wanted to go all the way down to 350, which would be a great thing in my view, the more carbon capture you have on the existing fleet, the better.
Has this always been the stance of the Environmental Defense Fund, or is this sort of an evolving stance, that your position on coal? I mean, and what do other environmental groups think of your position here? Like the Sierra Club has a huge campaign against all kinds of coal.
Well, at least a series of environmental groups, NRDC, the Nature Conservancy, the Pew Climate Center, Environmental Defense Fund, all agreed on the blueprint for legislative action that was proposed by the United States Climate Action Partnership. This is not only those environmental groups, Susan, but as you may know, it's Alcoa and BP, Shell, ConocoPhillips, the three major auto companies domestic in the United States, GE, Siemens, and we've all agreed that there's a role for coal in the future, and that there's an important role for carbon capture and storage.
Is it time for, are we ready for a timeline yet? I mean, we've visited universities where we have seen what they're doing with carbon capture and storage, and it's very experimental. It's really in the research stage. Are you ready to put this on a realistic time frame for commercial scale?
You know, the question isn't so much if I'm ready to put it on a timeline. The question is whether our Congress is ready to put it on a timeline. The way we get the facilities ordered is by having legislation that requires CO2 to go down.
Right. You believe policy is even more important than the technology at this point.
Policy, it's a chicken and egg problem. Until you, I asked one of the fellows working on carbon capture and storage why there weren't big facilities already today, and he said,
nobody's making us build them.
Exactly. And so the way you're going to get them is just by having a declining carbon cap. You phase that in. You have many different ways to meet it, but as that happens, you will see carbon capture and storage.
Okay, so you're speaking about this new climate agenda here at CERA. Tell us a little bit about what that will encompass.
The basic thing is that we have this problem because of the market. The market's been unregulated. People are just allowed to throw carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the air as though it's garbage. You know, if people could do that in New York, you'd have Central Park full of litter, full of garbage. People would be dumping their household waste there. But there's laws against that. So far in the United States, we've had no law whatsoever to control the dumping of greenhouse gases into our atmosphere. And it turns out, when we look around the world, there's never been an air pollution problem solved without a legal limit. And so the new...
look how long it took to get the acid rain regulations into the Clean Air Act.
1990, we passed them. We put a cap and trade system in place.
Scientists knew about it for decades.
They did, but rapidly after the law was put in place, we aligned the profit motive with getting sulfur out of smokestacks. The scrubbing technology advanced rapidly. Before the law, those scrubbers used to get gummed up. You needed two. You needed redundancy because they didn't work so well. Once you said the more sulfur you get out of that smokestack, the more money you can make because you can sell your excess reduction into a market. People wanted to buy it because there was this declining amount of permits issued, a declining cap. Suddenly the technology advanced, and that's the new climate agenda. Let's make the next billionaires the folks who figure out how to take CO2 out of our smokestacks, out of the air, people who figure out how to make electricity with zero carbon emissions. When we align self-interest with what the planet needs, wow, then you'll see innovation.
So you're talking policy. Are you on board with the energy provisions of the stimulus package plus what we will get whenever we get the comprehensive energy policy that follows?
Well, the stimulus package has some very good things in it. The money for weatherization of homes, the money for renewables, the money for solar energy, wind power, geothermal. These are excellent elements of the stimulus package. But as Larry Summers told me, it's like two blades of a scissors. Stimulus is one blade of the scissors. The other blade of the scissors needs to be a carbon cap and trade policy. Between those two blades is where we'll cut our way out of this recession. He was making the case that you need to do this for reasons of the economy, that this program can create the demand we're going to need to create jobs right here in America.
Now, running the EDF for so long, you've been a real champion of programs like the acid rain reduction program. Are you hoping for the same kind of accolades to come from a carbon trading regime here?
Well, it's not about accolades, but I'm definitely hoping the same kind of results come from efficiently tackling the climate problem in a way that produces answers, jobs, technologies we can export to the rest of the world. That's all I couldn't ask for more than that.
All right, Fred Krupp with EDF, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Susan.
And I'm Susan McGinnis with Clean Skies TV News.